We're going to use the board a little bit today. There are sheets on your table if you're able to write. If not, just you can feel free to watch. I certainly want you to be comfortable as you eat. This last week, my husband, we have 5 kids. My husband is Phil. He's a pediatrician here. And we just sent our 5th and last off to college, and so as a treat to ourselves, we went to the Canadian Rockies for 6 days and did some hiking. And we got there on Saturday, and on Sunday afternoon, Phil said, let's go on this 8-miler. It will be a good warm-up for you for the 10-miler. And I said, fine. I mean, I was up for that. So 8 miles does not, it sounds like a long ways, but he did not tell me that it was straight up a mountain. It was the most terrifying walk I think I've ever been on in my entire life. He actually didn't know that, and then when we got back, we read this stuff, and it was the most difficult hike in all of Banff National Park. It was only meant for the experienced climber. So literally, I was climbing up vertical walls of rock. I was on little trails going very steeply on a cliff. I'm afraid of heights. There was nothing there. I was terrified. I only yelled twice, and I loved him more at the end, so there you go. But I was thinking, when I was doing this, that sometimes when you think about history, it helps, because I kept telling myself, you know, as far as I know, no one has died on this. History will say that if I put my foot in front of my other foot, I will be okay. History will say, don't look down, just look right where you're going and don't freak out. And I had to tell myself and remind myself about history to be okay. And to teach me about how to do it, how to keep going forward. So that's a little bit about what we're doing today that I want you to understand. We're doing Joshua through Esther. And I am going to back up even another step, and we're going to do a huge overview, which is a way back step. And I want you to understand that this is history for your benefit. So, last time, when we did the book of the law, we did Adam. This is Adam to Noah. There's the flood. After the flood, there were several hundred years, and we had Abraham. And after Abraham, we had Isaac, Jacob, the sons, and then we had the wilderness. So if that will help you remember the first 5 books of the law, I want you to use that. If you're a visual person like I am, maybe that will help you remember. You go from Adam, number 1, if you want to say that's a number 1, to the wilderness. Genesis through Deuteronomy. Now we're going to start out on Joshua. Moses died in the wilderness. Moses never saw the promised land. Joshua takes over. Joshua goes into the promised land, and he starts conquering the land and had mostly great success there. So Joshua goes in, takes over the promised land, has mostly successes, some failures, of which they learn by, but it's mostly a time of prosperity, a time of obedience, a time where the Israelites are very grateful and God is blessing them. But after Joshua dies, after some years pass, they start this cycle. And it's 7 times, this is the book of Judges, 7 times they start this cycle. And it's a cycle where they get very, very happy about what's going on. And so they start sinning. They start forgetting about God because their life is so good. They have everything they need. They have no more enemies. They have plenty of food. They're wealthy. They're fine. They have nothing going on in their lives necessarily. And so they start sinning and worshiping other idols and doing many things that displeases God. So because of that part, then they end up and they become serving sin, or servitude, or however you want to, slavery, however you want to word that. They become very bad, and life becomes very, very bad then. And then they freak out because their life is so bad, so they pray, supplication. They pray to God, please help us, help us, help us. We're like so terrible, help us, you know, and then God comes in and saves them. And then life gets really good again, and they do the same thing 7 whole times. Judges is a very bad blot in the history of that nation of Israel. They never really got it. So after the Judges, then, we have the first king. The first king, and the first king comes in. The first king is Saul. We'll talk about this a little bit. Saul comes in, and then we have David that takes over, and then we have David's son, Solomon, that takes over. Now, Solomon is the one who built the temple, Solomon's temple, and Solomon had gobs of wealth, like in all those women, and I mean, more than you could ever imagine. And because of that, the people got so sick of all the taxes and all the money and everything that was demanded of them that they had a rebellion. And they then had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom, then, is the Assyrians. And the Assyrians came in and took over the northern kingdom, and they were gone. They had 19 different kings in the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom also had 20 different kings. Only 8 of them were actually good. None were good in the north. 8 were good, worshiped God, brought the people back to a knowledge of who God is in the southern kingdom. This southern kingdom only had 2 tribes. If you remember over here, this is way back over here underneath the A of law for Abraham. Jacob had 12 sons. So those 12 sons are all now have their own tribes here in this land. And 10 of those tribes went to the north. 2 of the tribes stayed in the south. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin. So then after these 2 tribes down here, they eventually got captured also by the Babylonians. They went to Babylonia for 70 years, and then they were brought back to Israel and became a nation again, the end of the Old Testament. So the end of the Old Testament happens after Nehemiah. That's the end of the chronological part of the Old Testament, is Nehemiah. In the middle of all of those kings, then, we have the prophets. And the prophets are there the whole time in the story of the kings, telling them over and over and over about what God wants. So, as I looked at this and I was doing this and I was writing this out, I realized that looks like the word joke to me. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, because actually it almost seemed like a big joke about what was happening to those Israelites. It kind of does. God says, I'm going to promise you something. I am going to promise you a land, and I'm going to bless you. And it did not really work out very well, did it? If you think about it, those 10 tribes then that got captured by the Assyrians, they were really never heard of again. And these only 2 tribes are left. Most of those people ended up staying in Babylonia. Just a few came back to Israel. There's just a small remnant of people left, and yet God still was faithful.